Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of A Cup of Joe. My name is Joe Escobedo, and with me on the show today is Wendy McEwan, who is the head of marketing and digital Asia Pacific at Knight Frank. I'm based here in Singapore. So thanks so much for being on the show, Wendy.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
So we have an exciting chat lined up for the listeners today. I think three things I really want to cover. We talked about last time. The first is, you've been in the digital world for 20 years, so really understanding the evolution that you've seen during that time. The second thing is you have previously been in a general manager role and now moved to marketing. So when I'm better to understand how can marketers think more like business owners. And the third thing I really want to get your advice on is moving from traditional to digital in a very, very sales-driven industry, which is something that a lot of my clients are trying to grapple with right now. So yeah, let's dive into it. Like I said, you have 20 years, in the digital world. Would love to hear kind of about your experience and the evolution that you've experienced during this time.
Sure. So yeah, I joined an internet media company in 1999 in Australia as the most junior member of the team. It was what became CNET Networks and then CBS Interactive, so an online news and reviews publisher basically, and we sold advertising to marketers, and we wrote technology content for people in the IT buying chain. So our readers or audience were from the IT organization, and then our customers or people who paid the bills were marketers trying to sell technology to IT professionals. And so I've always worked in IT and media mostly until recently, but always worked with marketers. Marketers were always my customers pretty much all the way through until I actually became a marketer. So when I joined the digital media industry, it was really just print magazines on the web. It was really just what we'd always done in print, which was sell someone an ad and throw it up on the website. So you create an audience, and everything was very local. Everything was take the mothership masthead and then do what you want with it in a local country. And we all bumbled along doing that, I think, and everyone got quite big and unwieldy through the early 2000s, and Yahoo was the biggest thing since sliced bread back then, up until around 2007, 2008, when you had a kind of triumvirate of things happen where you had the Apple, the iPhone and App Store kind of took everything global. You had the acceleration of Facebook as a social network. That was one app everywhere and one experience everywhere. And then you had Google release the, what I remember as being the SEO, the Panda update, where they basically changed all the algorithms to penalize duplicate content. So where before you could kind of leverage the mothership, now you had to stand on your own 2 feet. So there was like, and then you had programmatic media buying start coming into the fold as well, where people started to, between Facebook offering a very optimal marketing experience and really good reporting to marketers, and Google offering very targeted results through search marketing, you started to see this requirement to do a better job in how you were delivering outcomes for marketers and for businesses, at the same time as audiences getting used to one seamless experience from one, and of course Amazon in the background, they're just making it so easy to shop and do anything and everything. So that meant that every business had to think differently about their customer and about what they were delivering in terms of every digital business had to think differently, how we were delivering outcomes for marketers. And then programmatic media buying was also that kind of easy outcomes and potentially arbitrage driven in the background, but ultimately that easy outcome for marketers. So really had to rethink how we did business and re-platform everything, think about our audience differently, think about our product offering differently, think about our talent differently, which we had been doing all along, but it just got accelerated. So come 2014, After being in the media industry for 14 years, I left CBS Interactive after replatforming, restructuring, pivoting the whole business to adapt to that new normal. And then I spent a couple of years trying to figure out what to do next, because what I knew was, unless I worked for Facebook or Google or Amazon, I didn't want to work in a business that was supported by advertising as a revenue stream, because without their algorithms and their data and their global reach, it's very, very hard to compete against them. So media companies I knew were going to have a hard time ahead. So then I worked on understanding what else was out there, spent some time in some startups, spent some time deep diving into programmatic and ad tech, and then eventually landed at Oracle, working on customer experience technology. And that was really to figure out what were the tools available to marketers and sellers to be better with their clients and to deliver better business outcomes, because it is much more than advertising, right? Marketing is much more than advertising. And so what was the data layer? How can marketers take advantage of connecting all those siloed interactions and touch points with the customer? And you know, customer interaction is much more than marketing as well, right? It's sales, it's customer service, and actually it's supply chain as well. So the beauty of working at Oracle, which sold 22,000 tech products, was really understanding how technology enabled an entire business. And so with ERP and HR technology, you know, so finance and HR, supply chain, AI, everything. So I spent 3 years traveling around Asia, interacting with every industry, you know, sitting in the boardroom of all different sectors in all different countries and all different economies at different stages of digital transformation at the macroeconomic level, and everyone being disrupted by the unicorns at the same time, right? When you think about the emergence of Grab, Gojek in Indonesia, you think about Jio in India. I remember being in India around the time of demonetization and the launch of Jio, which was, you know, really transformational for the India acceleration to digital as an economy, to go from 200 million people online to 400 million people online within a couple of years. Really changes the game for that economy. And now I think they're at 600 million plus. So really, you know, really great learning to be in Pakistan and Sri Lanka and India and Indonesia and Thailand and Malaysia and Vietnam, talking to FMCGs and telcos and banks and retailers about how their customers changing, how they're thinking differently about their go-to-market, how they're thinking about leveraging technology to stay competitive against whether it be Chinese-based businesses or US-based businesses, as well as the other monopolies in their own markets. So super interesting learning. And then an opportunity came up to practice what I was preaching and apply my learnings. And so I joined Knight Frank about 18 months ago to really walk the talk and stop ranting and start doing. And it's been a great journey since then.
I mean, it sounds like it's quite a gamut from seeing the whole evolution. It sounds like, you know, early 90s was kind of like the wild, wild west of, you know, the internet world. And, you know, it was relatively, you know, nascent. There wasn't that many competitors, but now it's like super saturated. It's like, it's almost overwhelming from, you know, both consumers and the marketers' point of view. So it's interesting to see that growth, not only in the industry, but also across Asia. I mean, you have very, very deep insights in terms of each of these markets, how they've evolved over the past couple of years and decades. So really, really interesting stuff to hear about. And I know that, you know, you very much think like a business owner. I think it's one of the things you bring to Knight Frank is you think about marketing differently, because you've probably owned some P&Ls, you've spoken with customers, you understand their pain points and things like that. So I think this is a big challenge I see with a lot of marketers, is not thinking like a business owner. They think like marketers. Going back to what you're saying, they think of it in terms of like advertisement and media buying and stuff like that, which is part of the puzzle, but it's not the whole thing. So I would love to hear kind of your thoughts in terms of how you apply some of the general management principles to what you're currently doing.
Well, you know, it's ironic. I feel a little bit like an imposter a lot of the time because I don't think like a marketer. So it's, you know, it's a bit of a challenge for me in the other direction, but it's definitely, you know, I think the most important thing is interacting with customers. And it's one of the things I miss because I'm not yet knowledgeable enough necessarily to have the authority to lead an interaction with a customer, but that's the beauty of digital. I get to interact with and listen to and hear from it. And you know, this year in particular, there's never been a better opportunity to learn and interact with and learn from anyone, anywhere in the world. So I've been interacting with people from the US, the UK, all over Asia, Australia, you know, learning about the property industry, learning about what matters to them. And you know, right now, the future of work and the future of workplace has never been, you know, more topical. Everyone's talking about it, whether they're a head of HR, a CEO, a finance director, a head of procurement. It's not limited to the real estate industry right now. So I'm really lucky that I have a network that connects across all those job titles, and I can really get a very good handle on what people are talking about, what people care about, what people are thinking about, and then connect that back to my business and my stakeholders, and what are they trying to do and what are they trying to achieve and who do they want to reach and how do they want to influence them. So, you know, you need to stay informed. You need to understand your business. What is the revenue projections, you know, like what are they trying to do? How many people do they have to do it with? Who are those people trying to get that revenue from? How often, what's the sales cycle? You know, how long do they need to influence people before they turn into a buyer? So all of those kind of metrics you need to break down and understand before then you can map back what's the strategy behind building that layer of influence. And what I found, even in the industry before that I worked in, interacting with existing customers, you know, the traditional marketing, a lot of marketing tools, a lot of marketing software is built to help deliver marketing qualified leads, which are often net new. So the marketing to customers you already know is usually left to customer success or customer service, which is kind of weird, right? Because the 80-20 rule is that you can upsell and expand easier than you can land new customers. And in the real estate industry, obviously, relationships extend for a really long time, and actually the sales cycle might be super long. So interacting, building an engagement strategy with people we already know is just as important as capturing potential opportunities from new customers. So, you know, really defining who is the customer, who are we trying to reach, who are customers that look like those customers, and then thinking about what's the best way to reach them. The real estate industry traditionally isn't digital. It has not been, not only the sellers, but the buyers as well. I think I shared with you when I joined Knight Frank, the social selling index average for the real estate industry is 23. I don't think you or I have ever seen an SSI score so low. I was flabbergasted, and you know, to me that's a massive opportunity. There's nothing but upside in seeing an SSI that low, but it doesn't just come from the sellers, it comes from the buyers as well. So as we see generational change, obviously that will improve, but in the meantime we have to figure out ways to influence across a lot more channels, although I'm wondering how much it will change after this year. We will see.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. There's two things I want to touch on. Later, I want to get your thoughts on, you talk about the future of work and all the commercial real estate companies are talking about that. I want to get your thoughts in terms of how do you actually differentiate yourself, because it's a hot topic that everyone's in the mix. But first, before that, we talked about kind of, you know, in the commercial real estate space, it's not the most, you know, it's quite traditional in its mindset, both in the buyers and kind of the seller side. But how do you get the team sold into a social selling thing? If they're saying, like, for example, my clients, so the excuse is always, oh, my clients are not on, you know, LinkedIn, or they're not on social, which I tend to question my clients about. But what are some of the obstacles you face whenever getting them on board with social selling, and how do you really address those?
Well, actually, in some cases, the clients are not. You know, they've been right. you know, I was very skeptical and I used to share your skepticism, but actually in reality, in some cases they're not, because they're just as conservative and it's new to them too. So in that case, you have to look at the buying chain, right? Who are the people that influence the people you're trying to influence, and are they there? Who are the people around them, either in their own firm or in other firms that they would turn to? Because you know how it is, right? You have worked in companies where your CEO probably, well, maybe you're a bit young, but in the old days, the CEO didn't type his own emails, right? But someone was doing it for him, and someone somewhere is doing it for these people in some way, shape, or form. So it doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means you don't just do that, right? Like you can't go all in on one tactic. You have to think about where are the different places. So for example, engaging with industry associations and having a voice through third parties might be just as important as having your own voice in your own social presence. So social leadership is important, but it does have to be complemented, especially if it is, you know, a reality that not everybody is in that place.
Yeah, and you bring up two really good points. I think there's indirect benefits of social selling. You said even if they're not online, you reach them through the third-party organizations. We're generally active on those because they're trying to recruit new members or trying to promote their event. So I give you an example. I'm quite active, and literally after every LinkedIn Live I do, I'll usually get 2 or 3 requests to do some public speaking with my audience. So I think that's a byproduct of being active. It's not necessarily, like you said, reaching the direct people, but those industry associations are where, you know, the target customers are hanging out. So there's an indirect thing that takes place. Another thing that's quite interesting, and this is sparked from a conversation I was having with Daniel from LinkedIn, and we were talking about social as a way to gather insights as a testing tool. So for example, you're constantly putting out content, seeing what's working, what's not working. And look, if your audience is not on there, at least you know what are some of the conversations or what is some of the content that's getting engagement. And you can take the conversation offline. You can take it on WhatsApp or, you know, direct message or email, wherever your actual customers or prospects are. You take some of the key learnings and saying, I've been, you know, having these conversations around blank. Is it something that's relevant to you? Or, you know, at least you have a bit of more pulse in terms of what the community is talking about, and you can use that to steer the conversation. I found these were very well like follow-ups as well, like touching bases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great point. It gives you that talking point. And I often, you know, maybe in this region people aren't active, but in the US or the UK or maybe Australia they are. So you can tap into conversations elsewhere and then use that as a door opener or an icebreaker when you're trying to, you know, have that WhatsApp or phone call or coffee conversation, because you can speak to something with authority based on, you know, what you're seeing happen elsewhere. So I mean, it's such an intelligence tool for me personally, but getting other people into that mindset, like there's only so much time in a day, and people have such different workflows, right? And when people don't naturally have digital in their workflow, it's not easy to get them to think differently about it. It really is a challenge. So the best you can do is try and help them understand that, you know, my friend Andrea Edwards talks to the dopamine, being the dopamine in someone else's day. And so if you can help them get those dopamine hits and they can see that engagement level, and that starts with your internal employee network, right? Connecting all the champions across the business. That's a good kickoff point. And then from there, it's really how you strategically start finding the clients or the influences of clients that can really help you be visible and deliver that kind of authority across the industry.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think the more senior you go, there's usually a bit of apprehension in terms of trying new things because they're like, we've done it this many years. It's the way it's worked, it's the way it'll always work, kind of thing. But one thing that I've done in the past, and love to get your thoughts on this as well, is just kind of showcasing what success looks like this year in terms of sales. And it could be incorporating social selling, it could be incorporating other elements which are offline. But I think everyone likes to learn to some extent, or at least they're open to some extent. And I think they like seeing examples of like what other team members are doing, some of the traction they're getting. So for example, if a senior member is has no LinkedIn account, has never been active, if you have like a internal kickoff, for example, and you're showcasing like, the top 3 salespeople are doing this on LinkedIn, they're doing this, at events, or doing blah, 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 at least it gives them some context in terms of what they could be doing, what success looks like. And also it helps start that little bit competitive spirit, because every time I work with salespeople, or at least, they're very, very competitive. They always want to outdo each other. I think it's part of being a salesperson. So I found that has helped spark some of the, a little bit of the drive. I think that's part, and your part is, how do you sustain that? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think I did that in the beginning. I said, this is what the competition are doing. Actually, LinkedIn helped me build, the Sales Navigator team helped me build a whole bunch of charts around the competition and also the clients. This is what your clients are doing, because that's super helpful. But again, it can't all, it's not all that, it's not all about just that. And I've realized, because I was so gung-ho about it, a year ago or so when I first joined, and I felt like that everyone was invisible. And now I think it's got to be part of an overall mix. So really working together to find what works and what rhythm works and what momentum works, and then what else is there, and that's optimal. And I think right now, it's interesting, and I'd love your thoughts on, is social selling working at the moment? Because because everything is digital right now. It feels like the volume has gone up, 10x kind of thing, because everyone has nothing else.
Yeah.
And so to your point around the cut through, I don't know, and that traditional, so like, I hate social selling as a term. I think it's terrible, because it doesn't encourage you to deliver value to your client, right? Like, you can use LinkedIn to figure out what your client cares about, and then use that knowledge to be useful to your client in whatever format you want to interact with your client, as opposed to just, I want to send 100 interactions today and 100 interactions tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? So I don't really encourage social selling in the traditional sense, because it's just encouraging bad behavior. And the same with things like amplifying social posts. In my old job, I was one of the voices of the company, so I would get amplified by thousands of people, but it was meaningless, because there was no thought attached to it. It was just amplification, and amplification is just broadcast. It's just another term for broadcast. And so it's not really, that's not how I use social. So I always found it intensely uncomfortable. So that's not how I teach people to use social.
I'm with you 100%, 10%. I don't particularly like the term social selling, because I don't think it really applies to those who are doing it very well. If your intent is solely to sell, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. Versus if you're trying to add, value to your prospect, whether it's sharing resources or sharing tips or trends or whatever it is, that for me is more in terms of social selling. I agree with you 110%. I think that the volume has gone up exponentially, especially during COVID, which is why I think a lot of brands really struggle, both salespeople and brands struggle, because they don't really know how to stand out. But to your point, I think those who, go a little bit deeper, so either in focusing on a particular, niche or industry or geography or vertical, I think has a better chance of standing out versus, I'll give an example, and I look at my analytics all the time for the podcast. I could do a very generic one on social selling strategies for 2020. Super generic. I could try to appeal to everyone, but then it's just going to be so like generic, so vanilla, that it's going to get drowned out in the mix. Versus if I were to create a series on social selling best practice in 2020 for commercial real estate space in APAC. Now I might get a smaller pool, but I'm going to get the right people involved in that conversation. So I think that is the tactic that I've been using, and I've been using with clients in terms of drilling a bit deeper in terms of making sure it's relevant to that specific target audience, and not just saying, look, let's try to get as many numbers to see how many signs or how many engagements we can get, because at the end of the day, that's quite meaningless. For a lot of businesses, it's good for vanity metrics. We pat ourselves on the back, but it doesn't actually help the business. One of my favorite quotes is this from a guy from Aaron Orendorff. He's a brilliant copywriter. He says, I would rather have one target audience attend my event and buy from me that day than 10,000 people who have no interest in terms of what I'm doing. So that is a tactic that I've been using to kind of cut through some of the BS and some of the volume that's going on, and also just trying to make it less of a sales pitch. I think it's very obvious. You can see in a lot of different organizations and salespeople, their incentive or their goal is just clearly, can I get you this? Can I sell you something on the spot? And going back to your point, it definitely does not work in B2B. It may work in a B2C where you have like a $10 t-shirt, whatever you're selling, fine. But if you're selling $1 million or $100,000 product, it's no one has ever attended a webinar be like, yes, here's my check, take my money. It's like, it does not work like that. But there's still a mentality where, marketers and salespeople still have that's a, unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, right? Like, why are you relevant to me? It's the most basic thing. Like, every time you share something, you send something, you pick up the phone, why should I give you my time? Everyone's most limited resource is time. Make it about me, not about you. And if you make it about me, you'll get my attention. And that's like the single biggest thing that people need to understand in whatever format they're trying to communicate with someone. So if you're sending the same thing to 100 people, you're not making it about them. And you're not going to get their attention unless it's a gimmick, like you say, like $10 iPhones or something. But at the end of the day, if you really want to engage and build a relationship, you have to understand who you're trying to reach, what's in it for them, and then give them something useful. Whether that's research, whether that's insight, whether that's an invitation to something where they will learn something useful or meet useful people, whether you want to elevate their personal brand. There's so many different ways you can do it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's a term I always use in all my trainings, is what's in it for them. Because if you think about it from that perspective and you don't have an answer, I say don't post it, don't write it, don't publish it, because it's just boosting your ego, but it's just going to be a waste of time and piss people off. So I'd rather you not do it, think about what's in it for them, and think about how you can add value. But I think it goes back to what you're saying, relevant value. So I love that you're actually talking to your customers. You'd be surprised at how many marketers are not doing that, and understand what are some of the challenges and tying that back into conversation. So even with my content strategy, I don't think of ideas that I read and I said, oh, that looks interesting, let me write about that. It's very much, okay, I had a conversation with this client. They said, Joe, tell me about this. So I'll obviously address that in the conversation, the meeting, but then I'll also pull out snippets from that and share it, whether it's a series or a blog or whatever it is. So that usually sparks a lot of the relevancy in terms of actual clients, because these are the questions they're asking, these are the challenges they're coming to me with. So I think that's another thing.
Absolutely. And, clients have never been more accessible because everything's a webinar right now, right? So in the old days, talking about industry associations, the marketer might not have been able to get a ticket, right? Because you had to send a seller. You might not have been invited even to those company events where the thought leaders from the company were presenting to clients. Now we're running all the events ourselves, or we can sign up to, you can sign up to anything, and not only in your own country, you can sign up to anything anywhere in the world. So there's never been a better time to download a podcast, or not even download it, stream a podcast, watch the webinar replays, join things live, be part of industry associations. There's so many opportunities out there. Connect with people on LinkedIn and talk to them directly. But there's just so much going on. So there's no excuse not to be at least listening to your customer, if not talking to them.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I would love to hear kind of what are some of the questions you use to, I know it happens organically in a conversation, but are there any questions you use to unearth insights that can be applicable or helpful to what you're doing?
Well, I'm just at the cusp of still getting away with, I'm new to the industry, so I really want to learn from you. That's a pretty good icebreaker in itself. And usually because I've read something they've shared, or I've watched them on an event, or, seen some report, etc. So it's pretty easy. I don't look like a seller on my profile, so it's pretty easy to spark a conversation. In terms of then the questions, it's really, what's going on in your company, and as we were talking about before around the future of work and workplace. Everyone I know has an opinion on the future of work and workplace, so it doesn't matter who I talk to, whether it's I have a big network of connections from all different industries, obviously, so I tap into the conversation with everyone I talk to, and that helps bring that back to, because my colleagues are talking to people working in real estate, I'm talking to people who work in business, whether that's marketing, sales, partnership networks, CEOs, founders. I'm talking to a whole range of people, HR, heads of HR, etc.
No, I love that hack. I'm new to the industry. I think it's great, because I think a lot of people, they feel the apprehension, like because they're new to the industry, they'll just say, oh, I'm new, so I don't want to approach someone because I don't feel like I know enough. But I think coming from a perspective where you're genuinely interested in what they're doing and being honest and being like, look, I'm relatively new to the industry, would love to get your thoughts in terms of what you're doing, what you've seen work well, what is going to challenge you in your space, then it makes the conversation a bit more, it breaks down some of those barriers that you would generally have from a seller versus a buyer point of view. So really good tips.
Yeah. And I think, people love to talk about what they do. People love to talk about themselves. And people love to share, especially right now, because nobody knows where this is going. So everyone wants to kind of tap into, well, what are you seeing, kind of thing. So where you can facilitate that peer-to-peer learning, people are really appreciative of that. So as long as you are cognizant of, if you're asking for someone's time, what can you give them in return? And you're cognizant of opportunities on both sides, and delivering value both ways, win-win situations. People are very open to it. And when a lot of people reach out to me and ask for these kind of things as well, and I'm always looking for what can I'm happy to give back, but I also want you to make it easy for me. Like, make it easy for me to do this for you. Don't expect me to do all the work. I am time poor like you are. So, there's got to be a two-way effort.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think this is something advice I give as a side topic for if you're trying to get client testimonials. I think we make it way too difficult to get client testimonials. So I was giving advice to one of my clients last week in terms of, like, if you're catching with them for coffee, if you can just literally record the conversation, you transcribe it, you give it back to them and say, okay, here's what we discussed. Is it okay if we publish this on our website? So it's literally a yes or no from them versus them sitting down and being like, blah, 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 blah. It's like you're going back to saying, like, value their time, make it as easy as possible. Otherwise, people are just like, I don't want to do it, or I'll get to it when I get to it, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Wendy, there are some incredible tips in here. Am I missing anything else that I haven't asked you?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, there's so many different topics we could go into, but that's I would say to everyone to be bold, be brave, which is the Marketing Society mantra, to be brave, to have a voice, find your voice, don't be afraid to use your voice, but be informed. Use your voice and connect it to what the people you're talking to care about. Don't just talk about vanity metrics, talk about things that matter to the people in the room, and continue to learn. Always look for places to learn and people to learn from your competitors, your customers, your customers' customers, and other peers in the industry. There's always someone to learn from. So keep your eyes and ears open, and be confident and be brave.
I love it. I'm going to try to be confident and bold going forward. So thank you so much for that, Wendy. Really appreciate you sharing your insights. I learned quite a lot today, and it was really good catching up. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And if you enjoyed today's interview, please feel free to share it with any of your colleagues or bosses. There's a lot of really good tips in here. So thank you so much. Take care, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.